So, that yesterday the FBI released the name of the shooter, but there's still a lot of unknowns. We don't have a motive, and probably most prominently, we don't know how that shooter was able to get up on that rooftop just across from the rally. I mean, normally in situations like this, you have the Secret Service doing sweeps, and it appears that they did do a sweep, but that shooter was somehow able to get up and sort of evade law enforcement and Secret Service. So that is a huge question going on in this investigation. We know that there's obviously a local investigation happening, but also an investigation within Secret Service. Now, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have been briefed on the situation. They were in the Situation Room in the White House over the weekend. We imagine they will continue to be briefed. But this comes at a time of rising political violence and a threat of domestic terrorism here in the United States. So it's something government officials on both sides of the aisle are monitoring very closely.
Yeah, and we saw Joe Biden and the Speaker, the Republican Speaker of the House, come out and really try and dial back that rhetoric and ask for things to be toned down.
They did. And in fact, we've actually heard President Trump, the former president, he's called for national unity. He hasn't gone as far as calling for rhetoric to be toned down, but he has called for national unity. And what I think was notable was that on Saturday night following the shooting, Biden and Trump had a conversation over the phone with each other. We're told it was a brief but respectful conversation, but seen as a step in the right direction. Now, unfortunately, you still have people, particularly online, on both ends of the political spectrum, unfortunately spreading this misinformation and disinformation, spreading conspiracy theories about this assassination attempt. So that's not helping things, particularly as we go into a very big political week in this country's, the election year calendar, and that's the Republican National Convention taking place today, or start kicking off today in Milwaukee.
Yeah, and so let's turn our minds to that for a moment. Donald Trump says he wants to, in fact, that he's changed his speech and he's going to deliver a very different tone, one that he hopes will unite the country. What do you think we're going to see?
So I'm very curious to see whether we see a very presidential Trump. At a lot of these rallies, like the one we saw, up until the shooting on Saturday, President Trump, is speaking in a much more casual way. There's sort of like a train of thought. He uses these rallies to go after his political opponents, take jabs at them and such. But I'm curious to see whether on Thursday he takes a much more presidential and unifying tone. I think it's a big opportunity for him to do that. Talking to Republicans over the weekend, Bev, one thing they've told me is they think this, even though it was awful and tragic that what happened, someone lost their life in the crowd, a Trump supporter lost their life. They're saying that ultimately, these images of President Trump swarmed by Secret Service with blood pouring down his face, his fists in the air, defiant, they're saying that essentially helps him. It helps unify people around him. And we're seeing sort of that unifying effect take place among Republicans. Nikki Haley, his former campaign rival in the Republican primary this year, will be speaking at the convention. So we're really starting to see, we were seeing it before, but we're starting to see Republicans really rally around him. And at the same time, we're seeing Trump just dominate in election polls.
Yeah. And to that point, Joe Biden, it's hard to believe that just last week, Joe Biden was fighting for his political life. How do you think that's going to play out?
So I think initially, and, unfortunately, we don't, this was a tragedy. Don't misunderstand me, but it's political in nature because it's happening in the context of a presidential election. So, I think initially a lot of us said, well, this puts an end to the most disastrous news cycle of Joe Biden's political career. But at the same time, though, it unifies Republicans. Republicans are saying this is going to draw more voters towards them. In fact, there were a number of, House Democrats at behind closed doors this past weekend. There's reporting that suggests that they're saying it seems like this is going to be a landslide for Trump at the end of the day. Now, we know that there's a lot of time to go between now and Election Day. We also have the Democratic National Convention in Chicago coming up in August. But, it looks pretty good for Donald Trump right now.
Yeah, indeed. I know you're a reporter, but I'd love to get your sense personally how you feel in this moment.
It's shocking. The last time we saw a president, former or sitting, with an assassination attempt on them was 40 years ago. So I'm 31 years old. So I was
you weren't born.
I've never experienced something like this. But I think what's so chilling, Bev, was actually the morning before this rally took place. I was on the phone with my father, and we were sort of talking about being anxious about the political climate and afraid that someone was going to get hurt, that there would be more political violence. We're coming off the heels of January 6th. We've seen kidnapping plots against, for example, current Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked. Steve Scalise, a congressman and Republican, was shot in 2017. So we were talking about this. We were having this conversation about political violence, and then really a few hours later, there was this assassination attempt. So it's pretty chilling.
Yeah, extraordinary times. Always good to get you on, Julia. Thank you so much.
Thank you.